Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to our very first seminar in the LaunchPad Bootcamp program on providing a guide to operations. I'd like to welcome everyone tuning in today. Welcome to all the LaunchPad attendees in Zoom. Today, we're delighted to host you and your mentors as part of this bootcamp program. I'd also like to give a special welcome to those watching the in-conversation for today's program via Slido. Before we begin, it is my honor to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. Whilst we are dispersed across many traditional lands, we are connected virtually. I am coming to you from the unceded lands of the Burrong Boon Wurrung and the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nations. I acknowledge the continuous and unbroken custodianship of the land, waters, and culture of this country, and thank the elders past, present, and emerging for allowing us to gather here today. I pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us here today. Now, today's program is the first in a series of 6 meetings that will connect you with a network of experienced entrepreneurs, investors, educators with the tools and insight to grow your business. For the first portion of today's session, we will facilitate an in-conversation with guest speakers Robbie Lockhart and Mo Ziadin to provide insight into building an effective operations model that allows for scale. We'll also cover some practical, legal, financial, and compliance tips that are often overlooked by lean startups. I am very, very delighted to introduce today's speakers. Before I get started, programs like these are only possible through great partnership. EdGrowth is delighted to have a partnership of AWS to bring the 2022 LaunchPad Bootcamp program to you. I would like to thank AWS and the team, including Mo and Camille, for their long-standing partnership and collaboration with EdGrowth. To learn more about the benefits of partnering with AWS EdStart and to apply to become an AWS member, please use the link that is in the chat. So it should be in the Zoom chat and also the Slido chat. Now, today, our guest speakers, we've got some experts in the room, so I'm very excited to have them here. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Robbie Lockhart, who's the Vice President of Global Revenue and Sales Operations at Class Technologies. Robbie is, as I mentioned, the Vice President of Global Revenue and Sales Operations at Class, a software developed by Class Technologies that adds teaching and learning tools to Zoom, making the virtual classroom feel like a real classroom. There she executes programs delivering company growth initiatives, incremental revenue, and innovative services leading to customer retention and referrals. We also have Mo. So Mo is the EdTech sales specialist at Amazon Web Services, leading the EdTech territory with a focus in the ANZ region, but extending to APAC. Mo is the driving force for innovating change, formed from his strong market knowledge, business acumen of over 12 years experience in the information technology industry. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate it. Great to see everyone.
Thank you, Luke. Thanks for the introduction.
So we've got a really great conversation here today. So just for those watching, this is probably going to be about a 45-minute conversation. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we will try to weave them into the conversation. If not, please don't fret. I'll meet with Robbie and Mo after this, and if we've got some great questions, we can address them offline and get back to you. So please make sure that you send in any questions that you have. So I guess the best place to get started is by setting the scene a little bit. So I might start with you, Robbie. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your expertise within this space?
Sure, absolutely happy to. So again, Robbie Lockhart. So a little bit about my background. I started in software sales, worked for IBM for several years and a couple of resellers, and then transitioned into operations and started a consulting company where I helped a couple dozen startup companies launch, get funding, build their business plans and processes, kind of sat in a COO seat until they got their first logos, on the website, helped them move through their first seed and first round of funding. And then currently I work for Class Technologies, again, a EdTech startup company going through a couple rounds of funding now, and now we just purchased Collab. I also own 3 companies myself. Again, I still own that consulting company. We own a trucking company and a couple other companies as well. So definitely well-versed in launching and starting companies and in startup world. So thrilled to be here and happy to connect with all of you.
Robbie, you sound like the perfect expert to talk about this. So
yeah, I can share all the mistakes and what not to do. Luke, I think you're muted.
Why do you need to jump on it?
I was muted, unfortunately. If you can just make sure that you're muted throughout the conversation, that would be really handy. And then Mo, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and your areas of expertise at AWS?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Luke. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to some as well, depending on your location. So my name is Mo. Mohammed is my full name, but you can call me Mo. My title here at AWS is the EdTech lead or sales specialist, but basically my role is more predominantly about working with EdTechs as partners as well as customers. Your advocate here sitting with you in terms of your business growth and development. I've been into IT industry for over 12 years, so I'm one of those guys who's had worked with hardware as well as transition from typical hardware into cloud. So I have worked with, vendors like HPE, Aruba, Dell, and also with IT distributors, Ingram Micro. So I've been working with, almost the entire chain or the channel of IT. I joined AWS in 2019, and I've been working focused with EdTechs. I work, with the entire EdTech community in ANZ. So partnering with great partners like EduGrowth, where we get to meet new startups with the ecosystem. And basically the focus and the intention is to build a culture where we support EdTech industry, not from the idea to, invention to the development, and also in regards to your growth and development journey. So my role typically is kind of a hybrid role where I will work with you as EdTech partners as well as customers, a hosting provider. We have programs like EdStart that gives the startups a platform where you can, implement your ideas and start developing your platform on AWS without worrying about cost, because that EdStart program will cover the cost. That program also includes training, so you can get trained. When you want to develop anything, there is training available. Then we will also be doing community events where we will connect you with mature EdTechs, and you will be able to learn from them, their journey, how they have succeeded, blah, blah, blah. And then we have our education teams where we will connect you to find customers for you. So it's like, end-to-end support you have from us. That I will discuss in details if you have further questions. But yeah, it's a long introduction, but this is my typical work that I do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mo. And throughout this, these 6 sessions, I'll be referring back to what Mo has just mentioned in terms of the assistance that AWS can help you with. If you do have any questions or concerns, we can pass your details on. Now, this is going to be a really interesting question because I guess the very first place is about building a strong foundation. Robbie, you mentioned that you've had several different startups, and Mo, you've worked with startups. So I'm going to pose this question slightly different to both of you. I guess I'll start with Robbie. Robbie, in your experience, how do you build strong operations as a startup?
Yeah, a great question. So, first and foremost, it is understanding, who your target market is with the product and who you're going after. And, a lot of mistakes that startups make is they want to go so wide and kind of go everywhere. They want to go too narrow, but it's kind of finding that perfect medium of like, who is a target market for this and who can I kind of have an easy line of like entry to get into. So it's establishing that, as well as starting to establish your network and becoming a subject matter expert in your area, doing like LinkedIn live sessions, fireside chats, on LinkedIn, those types of things. But also really understanding like what you want to do, setting your goals and your targets for in the first year and sticking to that, building a really strong leadership team, not really with, it's not always with a great maybe pedigree of people you're like, oh, we've been at all these companies, but people that understand how to launch, run, maintain, and grow a startup company. It's essential. So I think that's probably one of the core things in kind of your starting of your operations in your first 3 to 6 months that you want to establish.
Brilliant. That's really, really interesting. It's good. I think it's such an important note, finding and becoming a subject matter of a particular area, like really building that credibility in from the start. It's a really good point. Mo, you've worked with a bunch of startups. So I'm curious, from someone who works with them, what are some of the key features that you see for successful startups? So what are successful startups doing at that foundation level that's working? And then maybe some things that aren't necessarily working.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, Luke. And this is somewhere that, startups have to really think about, right? One of the strong foundation that I would say for a startup is to identify your market, who your customers are, what are the challenges in the market that these customers are facing, and what are your solutions to address those challenges. Because you just don't want to be another company. You just don't want to be another solution out of 10 other solutions that are there in the market and just trying your luck to see if you would be successful. Just do your research, find out what is not there in the market or what are the customers struggling with. So have a focus, as Robbie said, I totally agree with her. Make sure that you build that network and have your deep focus onto the area where you want to start from. Understand who your customers are. Make sure that you did enough research about the gap or the challenge that in the market, and then work with those partners who are already established in that industry, who can support you with your journey, right from the idea phase to development, and also connecting you with resources that are available so that you can learn while you build. So I think for me, that's the key focus has to be.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So
can I just tap on one thing? Oh, I'm sorry, Luke.
Of course, Robbie.
Just one thing, a great point, Mo, about learning as you build. There's a lot of startups that start, kind of with an engineer is a CEO and has this great product idea and builds the product and goes to market. But one thing that I have noticed that is a miss in a lot of startups that I've partnered with is that they're not getting the user experience. They're not going out early enough to say, how does the end user use this platform? How is their experience? Even what does the real estate look like? What are their needs and things like that? So kind of shifting from an engineering perspective of like, oh, I'm going to build this great product and it's going to do all these great things, but really get that user experience and feedback. I think is crucial from the beginning, because at some point in your journey, it could be a year or 2 years down the line, you're going to start getting that feedback, and it's hard to kind of circle back and then like rebuild or kind of go back to the drawing board. So start doing that really early on. So that was a great point of kind of getting that user feedback. Really important.
Yeah, and look, and that's what we're talking about. We're really talking about building a strong foundation. We want to make sure that that moving forward, we've got the structures in place, so we don't have to do that really awkward, uncomfortable circle back. It's built in so we can adjust and pivot when needed, but continue to constantly move forward. So just to highlight, we've got four major things that you both kind of touched on. So subject matter is really important. If you're a startup, making sure you understand what you're doing, understand who you are and what you're about. A point of difference, so making sure that you stand out, especially if you're going into a very convoluted or full market, what makes your point of difference? That kind of moves into knowing your customer a little bit and understanding what your customer needs and what their experience is going to be like. And then really interesting, you both mentioned networking and connections. How important is that for a startup?
Can I go? You go wrong. Now you go. All good.
It's critical. It's critical. I mean, especially nowadays, a lot of things are by networking, referral, word of mouth. And I mean, your name, your credibility and kind of things that you do is core to anything that you do. So really building that network, being very transparent and kind of like honest about like what you're doing, what phase you're at with like your product, engaging with your customers, in a very transparent way of like, hey, we're in a beta phase. This is what we're doing. And getting, again, a group of networks that can like co-sign for you a little bit, I think is very important. And, I don't want to rate how important, LinkedIn is now, of connecting with people, the fireside chats, so subject matter expert, conversations, is really key. And it helps you, branch out a little bit more within, with outside of your network into other people. It's very important.
Yeah, and I will add to that with my practical practical examples, right? So as you know, Luke, and by the way, to the audience who are listening to me, I I conduct like network catch-ups with EdTechs like once in a month in every major city, mostly in Sydney because I'm based in Sydney. In there, we usually invite about 10, 12 EdTechs that has, about 50% of the EdTechs are startups, and then another 50 or 40% are established ones, or the ones that are still going through the, growing phase. And then this is kind of an example where I want to show why the network is really important, right? So when these early startups meet this established one, they will learn their journey. That's not the point. The other point is that they will also get opportunity to work with other EdTechs. For example, there was a network catch-up that we had where two EdTechs, they came to a conclusion that they are happy to work with each other. So EdTech B was happy to white label the solution or add their offering an analytics solution into the EdTech A solution. And then they went into the market as a one team. And now they are like growing like really crazy. Like we are working with 1,500 RTOs to provide that solution, CNET education as well. So there are like a lot of opportunities that they are coming through, and this network will really help you. So what you need is a platform that helps you connect with different companies that will also, that's able to get you learning, knowledge, and at the same time, it gives you business opportunities as well.
That's a really good tangible example of the power of networking and the power of connecting. I know from my experience working with startups, some startups will feel that they need to keep everything, circle the wagons and keep it really close because they've got this great idea. But when you start to allow other people to be involved, that's where those organic connections can really form. So that's great. I mean, if we look at those things as building that strong foundation. So again, subject matter, point of difference, deep connections and networking, and then understanding your customer. Once we get through that and we've got that strong foundation, where the next step is usually we've tried some things and then we want to grow. So we want to make sure that we've got a model that we continue to scale with. Robbie, as you mentioned earlier, we don't really want to circle back if we don't need to. We'd rather continue to grow. So Robbie, I'll start with you. How do you, in your experience, build a sustainable model for scaling? Are there any tips that you can provide?
Oh, definitely. So, I mean, there's so many things. I think some of the core things is, and I think we'll touch on it later though, is tech stack. Invest in your tech stack, is a big thing. We can touch on that a little bit later. But also, don't skip on the marketing, especially the very beginning. Like the budget, the funding is so tight. Like you're literally trying to make payroll, trying to keep the lights on, those types of things, but do not skip on the marketing. Getting your product name and brand out there is crucial and it's critical. You can spend, the majority of your budget on product and engineering, but then when you're ready to go to market, you're depending on, an entry-level SDR or one salesperson to go out and cold call to, sell your product, and you're just going to get frustrated. Everyone's going to get frustrated. So invest in marketing early on. Also invest in tracking your customer journey from the very top of the funnel through the close, through their entire sales cycle, through implementation, renewals, and those types of things. And you're going to think my first year, why do I care about renewals? Why do I care about what this customer is doing 12 months down the line? I guarantee you, once you get funding and you're a year in and you have renewals, you're going to start asking questions, or your board is going to start asking you questions. What are their commonalities in these customers that are renewing? What are their commonalities in these customers that are churning? What are the milestones that created these different actions? And if you miss a whole year or two of tracking milestones in the customer journey, you're going to miss so much critical data. It's going to be really lost for you, and you're going to kind of realize it in the back end. So at the beginning, you're going to say, oh, it may be expensive for me to do like a churn zero or do something like that of a customer journey, but I can guarantee you it'll pay off in the end. So those are probably the two biggest things outside of investing in the tech stack that I would really encourage you guys to do. And also in your employees that you're hiring, like I mentioned in the beginning, you want to hire people that understand and can work in a startup. They need to be scrappy. They need to understand, what it's like, what it takes to be in a startup. But as you're hiring your sales team, and you're going to have a business plan, and you're going to have a budget, and you're going to have revenue goals of, I want to hit 12 million, 35 million, whatever it is in your first year. And you're going to go and count it back and say, okay, at an average deal size of XYZ, I'm going to end up needing 12 sales reps. Please, in your first year, do not hire 12 sales reps. Hire 2 or 3 really quality SDRs and sales reps that, again, understand and work really well in a startup environment. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be a grind, but investing in a smaller sales team, larger marketing is going to get you to much higher revenue growth, as you kind of go down the years and go through your journey.
It's really, really interesting, and it's such a valuable point. Trying to align those short-term goals with those long-term goals. Really, really important. I've just got a question. Just a reminder to people in the Zoom room, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll get them over to the panelists as soon as we can. So Robbie, I've got one from Pablo. When is a good time to hire a head of sales instead of individual reps?
Oh, great question, Pablo. So it depends on you as a CEO, as your skill set in sales. If you are not good at sales and if you are not a salesperson, hire a really good head of sales early on. But make sure that head of sales has an individual quota, is also an independent contributor as well as a sales manager. If you are a great salesperson, if you can go in, Pablo, and you can demo and you can sell it, hire just a really good sales rep. You don't need a head of sales that you're going to pay $300,000 to manage a team right away. What I would invest in early on is an operations person, a really, really strong sales ops person and revenue ops person to come in, because they can actually manage a sales team to a certain point till you need an actual sales manager.
Great, brilliant. Mo, with building, so Robbie just kind of outlined some of the important things to look at when building that model for scaling. In your experience working with a number of different startups, what are the key roles that startups tend to fill that from the start, and what are the ones that they neglect that you've noticed that they really need to pay attention to? So Robbie mentioned some marketing and sales. Is there anything else that you think a lot of early stage startups will miss, or is it marketing and sales like are a big thing that a lot of people tend to think, well, I can do that myself?
Well, no, Robbie has touched on to the great points, and I just want to add few more points to the marketing part because I can't agree to her. But to add another thing, I would also like to add tools that are necessary to scale out your business. For example, tools like Salesforce or databases engine, so that you have that data and how the nature of your business. You can do easy predictions, or you can analyze your data and make sure which term or what's the season, something like that. It will really help you when you have that data, when you have that. And Salesforce will really help you to create your customer profile. You will know your universe, you will know the opportunities, you can track and work on them. So it's a great tool. Now, to add to the point of that Robbie mentioned about marketing, it's really important to market, make sure that you have a right marketing strategy, make sure that you are showcasing yourself in front of your audience customers in a way that is attractive to them, that it's not about what you are trying to sell, it's about what you are trying to help them, how you are solving their issues. And one of the things that I will really like to focus is building your case studies, right? So if you have helped your customer in a way that has helped them to overcome the challenge that they have, just talk to your customer and build a use case, maybe a video or just a written use case, and start listing about what the challenge was and how your company has provided them solution and how happy your customer is, and give them just a point of reference so that they can verify that, that really helps to build that assurance with your customer community. So, because, it makes more sense from them to hear from the end customer rather than us talking about, hey, we are great, we did this, blah, blah, blah. If that makes sense.
That's a really, really good point, because that brings us back to the initial, building a strong foundation, being an expert in subject matter. What a great way to prove that you know what you're talking about than having, again, tangible examples and case studies that you can just say, like, this is a customer that we've helped. This was their problem, and this is how we help them navigate and find a particular solution. So it's a really, really good point. are there common mistakes? So we talked about these are the things that we need. Where we kind of touched on long-term and short-term goals and the importance of building that strong team. Are there any common mistakes that startups make when trying to grow their business? So do they tend to look in a particular direction? Robbie, you kind of touched on this by saying the importance of sales and marketing. Is there other areas, or is it really sales and marketing that people tend to neglect a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. This isn't as relevant now because of COVID, but prior to COVID, it was startups spending a lot of money on a brick and mortar building. You don't need a brick and mortar building to get your company launched. That was a big, mistake that I seen very early on. And like I said, over hiring on your sales team. These are very expensive hires that, are not needed until you actually start bringing revenue in. And when you go to, pitch to investors and you're, having to allocate where your money's going and where the revenue is going, and what your revenue is at. And if you're not showing a revenue growth to balance all of these hires you have, it's going to be really hard for you to get funding and investors. And again, just focusing on the wrong thing. And this may kind of come down in our conversation, but a lot of startup companies will have a really good conversation and a demo with a client, and they'll pivot their entire roadmap and their build and their plan to build a feature set specifically for one client. Now, if it's, IBM or Amazon or Nike, maybe, you want to consider that and building that into your feature set, but don't divert too far from your roadmap just to do one sale. Again, it's like, look at the long game versus like, let me just close this one deal. Because now you're taking your focus away of the broader, market that you're trying to sell to just to close, one opportunity in one deal. That's a mistake I've seen almost every startup make early on. So definitely one you don't want to do.
Yeah. And I would like to add one more mistake, Luke, and the audience as well, is, when you are building a solution and when you are creating your platform, think from a customer perspective, not from your perspective, because you want to make sure that your interface is customers are easily able to digest that and able to do it themselves. So think of creating it more like a self-serving portal rather than, them reaching out to your support team or having to do like a customized setup every time, because that will need enough resources from your side. And as Robbie mentioned, you want to, cut that cost of hiring more and more people, because that's one of the biggest costs for any company. So when you build your platform, make sure that you think from your customer perspective, have that vision in mind. The UX is where that you want to spend good time on, to ensure that it's kind of, for customers, it's kind of a self-serve kind of a portal where they can themselves, they don't have to come to you.
Great point.
Yeah. And look, again, circling back to that strong foundation, understanding your customer, not pivoting or changing or throwing everything out because one customer doesn't see it fit, really understanding and thinking about it from the customer's perspective. So that's, fantastic information, and hopefully something really valuable for those listening. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll weave them into the conversation as we go on. So we're going to talk a little bit more we're going to start talking about legal, contractual, and financial aspects. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to assume the very first point of call is to speak to someone who is. But I'm going to ask these questions. So what are some examples? So you're tackling the 3 B's for every startup is always going to be legal, contractual, and financial. Robbie, Mo, I'm not sure who wants to start, but if we start with legal, what are some tips or some advice for those within that legal space?
I can start.
Yeah, brilliant.
Cool. So basically for startups, my recommendation will be to, the thing is, being a startup, right? You want to invest your time in a way that helps to grow your business and make sure that your focus is right where you want to focus more on, rather than worrying about, of course, compliance and legal requirements are a must for every company, but there are other ways you can offload that. You don't have to spend your time, because it takes like a lot of time, because I started my own startup company 3 years ago, and it was taking me so long to read about the legal requirements, blah, blah, blah. Instead, I just offloaded that to a legal entity. But for EdTech startups, right, you are lucky because you have vendors, established vendors whom you can offload that work for them, right? For example, if you are hosting on AWS, I'm just talking about AWS because I work here, you can use any vendor, but for AWS, right? If you are hosting on us, then you could get support from us from a legal perspective, like compliance, how you can be compliant, how can you make sure that your platform is compliant to the educational requirements? How can you make sure that, its certifications are all in place, blah, 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 blah. If you are responding to a tender, how can you get that legal support? So you have to ensure and make sure that you are partnering with those vendors who can assist you in these things so that your focus will still be on the development and, solution part, you are not diverting your focus from that to, fulfilling the requirements of compliance or certifications or blah.
Yeah. Robbie, what about your experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. To tap on the compliance part most of, then I'll kind of pivot into like the day-to-day of legal and contracts. So a big part of, being compliant, and a lot of people don't think about it early on because they're like, let me focus on selling is, and we talked about how important Salesforce is, and we could talk about that a little bit more when we get to the tech stack, but putting those permissions and compliance and regulations and kind of like guardrails within your database so people can't mass download your entire database of contacts and emails and they go to another company and take all these things. Those are really important things to do very early on, just your own internal compliance and kind of the rules that you have. So again, kind of touching back to like have a really sharp operations person that can kind of do these things for you and can control that. And about legal, I definitely agree. Early on, you can outsource, a legal team to help you do things, but internally, don't make it hard for your clients to buy from you. Don't have a 20-page terms and conditions that everyone's going to want to redline. Make it very easy for your customers to buy from you. Have, a very mutual, terms and agreements, a very clean order form and those types of things to make it very streamlined. And you don't have to go back and forth negotiating with legal for red lines and things like that. It's going to take so much of your time. And especially if you're outsourcing a legal team to do that, it's going to cost you a lot of money. That's really going to cost you more than even the worth of the contract. So that's a big thing, early on to do. But also with contracts with your vendors, one thing is do not sign a multi-year contract. They're going to say, oh, if you sign a 2 or 3 year contract, I'm going to give you this great deal. Your business is going to shift so drastically within that first year and second year. If you lock yourself into a multi-year contract with a vendor, now you're stuck maybe with whatever, a chorus or a gong or something that may not be a right fit for your company a year down. You've spent $100,000, $200,000 and you're locked in a contract. Please negotiate your contracts, redline any auto renewals and do a 1-year contract. Even if it costs you a little bit more at the beginning, it will definitely pay off down the road because your needs will change down the road. So I think that's very important. And probably the third thing with contracts is with your customers, kind of what we're touching on, like don't build a feature just for one customer. Don't give away your product all the time. Don't say, oh, I'm just going to give it to you and just try it out. You'll have a couple of people that you want to be in beta, but those early on customers, just almost like the opposite, what you don't want to do with a vendor, you want them to sign at least a 1-year contract and kind of be committed to that, and have them go through the customer journey. So, that's a big thing, I think, with, having that contract for your resale to your customer is very important early on. Even if you're like, I'm going to sell it to you for $1,500, whatever you do, but have that contract to lock them in, because then you could actually, and this is one thing to note, if you have a customer that's on your platform for free, when you recognize revenue or they do anything, if they're not a contractual contract, or if they're just in a pilot period, you cannot count them actually as a customer. So you want a customer, even if you say, I'm going from a pilot to an annual contract, but in an actual contract, then you can actually recognize them as an actual customer of yours. So very important to realize.
That's a really good point. A lot of startups, especially in this space, when we spoke about earlier about becoming a subject expert and networking and kind of getting your name out there, that free product is something that's very common. So I think that's a really good point. Making those timeline sensitive, so you can say like, here it is free for X amount of time, whatever it is, before you try to convert them into sales. We've got some some great questions coming through. So I get Robbie, I'll defer to you for this one. I think there's another one that Mo, you touched on earlier, but this first one is from Anthony. Any advice for choosing a board? What roles? Who do I get? How many people? Executive, non-executive? Is there a one size fits all, or what's the best way to tackle that?
Great question, Anthony. Do not choose your spouse. I will tell you that right now from a lot of companies that, bring on their husband or their wife as part of their board member. Do not do that. Use people in your network that, obviously that you trust, that have experience and understand a startup company, understand that you're going to have to pivot, understand that your target goals, you start the year of like, we're going to hit 35 million or we're going to hit 12 million, that's going to drastically change through the year. So someone that understands that, but someone that has a network, someone that's part of an incubator group that can help you network with other people, someone that can actually help you with marketing, help you bring on customers, help you with investor meetings, those types of things are really important. But somebody that it's very important, especially early on. It's somebody that you trust, to come in to give you advice and to lead you in the right direction, I think is crucial. As you start to grow, as you start to get funding, you want to bring in other people, that kind of have, not only a network, but really strong experience in other places, but you want someone that you can actually run the race with and be very transparent and honest with. And that's, kind of in it for the win with you. Super important.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned that earlier, having people that you trust and that are there to grind, and, having those people around you is obviously going to be fantastic. Really, really some fantastic responses. We've got some mentors in the room who are helping us out. One of the questions was around contracts, and we've had a lot of people providing answers, which has been fantastic. So I'll just, for everyone who is listening, the question was around any good tools to write contracts for people who've never written one. And we've got some really great responses. So start with a competitor's contract. I think that's fantastic. Legal vision. And Mo mentioned that earlier about leaning on other people. So leaning into those expert vendors who know how to do this. Both fantastic answers. And then in regards to the board, we've got a really good response around, do you need a formal board, or do you need an advisory board? So really that first thing to think about. So some great responses there, fantastic everyone for throwing those in.
And just to add to that,
go Mo.
Yeah. This is a great initiative from government as well. Like in every state, we have like startup hubs. Like in New South Wales, we have one. For Victoria, we have one. You can just be a member of that startup club hub, and there you could actually get the legal advice to, add further into your contracts. So that really helps.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. There is a lot of support out there for startups. Yeah. What we might do after this is, when we do a summary, we'll try to find some of those government links that we can help, or that we can provide the viewers and listeners. I guess the next big part, if we're talking about the 3 beasts for every startup being legal, contractual, and financial, we'll move to financial, because I'm sure a lot of people have questions. Robbie, I'm going to go back to you. What's some advice in terms of finance? What do people need to consider?
Absolutely. So again, kind of touching on like who you're hiring, just really plan where you're going to spend your money and stick to that plan. I think it's very important. Obviously invest a lot in product, a lot of user experience, marketing, and a really strong operations person. And I can't stress enough how important it is to have an operational person, and there's a lot of operational people that have a finance kind of background inside too. So kind of finding that mix of someone, I think, is really, key to help with you. So you don't have to hire a controller and operations and all these other people, even like a sales manager. This person can kind of do multiple roles, for that. So plan where you're going to spend your money, stick to that plan. Look for opportunities, like we mentioned, for funding, join incubator groups, different things like that, but don't spend so much time maybe on ones that, are too low of a dollar of funding, or want to come in and say, I want, 10% for, $500,000. Be very smart about like where you're going to get investment and funding. But also, make sure that in the first, year or two, you as the owner, you're not going to pull a salary. Make sure that you're investing in your people, in your tech stack, and it's going to be hard, the first couple of years, but it's definitely, worth to make sure that you're putting the money in the right place to grow the company, build a really strong, foundation, and and a really strong team. I think that's probably the most important things. And then have someone that understands, taxes, payroll, those types of things. A big mistake of a lot of startups is they're like, oh, let me just get like Gusto and do payroll and not really understand taxes and do XYZ. And can I have a 1099 person, a W-2 doing the same job? And then 2 years down the line, you're like, oh, wow, I owe $800,000 in taxes. So that's really important from the start for someone that understands that it can and help you manage that.
Brilliant. Yeah. John has mentioned something in the chat. Recommend working with experienced startup lawyers. Because situations are going to be different for startups. So working with someone who's an expert in that particular space is always a really, really good idea. We're going to pivot to tech stack. So one of the hardest parts of getting operations right is the tech stack. So what do you recommend for getting your tech stack right? Robbie, I guess we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So the core is Salesforce. Invest in Salesforce. Please do not say, I'm going to run on Google Sheets or Excel sheets for the first year, or let me just pay $12 a month for Zoho. Invest in Salesforce and invest again in an operations person that can build Salesforce out for you, and baby step it, build it for what's right for you right now. And then you can grow to what your business requirements are. I highly recommend, and this is kind of, funny saying this because I do own a consulting company, don't hire an outsourced consultant to come in and build your tech stack for you. They do not understand your business and your business needs, no matter how much they're going to tell you they do. They're going to come in and cookie cutter a Salesforce instance for you. And then when your operations person comes in, they're going to spend the next 6 months unpeeling that onion and rebuilding it for your business needs. So just from the beginning, have that operations person that's only with your organization and build that out for your business needs that can grow. But please invest in Salesforce. Have your data in there, have your data accuracy, your data hygiene, and then you can grow from there. You can spend a little bit less even on some of the marketing things like doing a HubSpot. You don't have to get Marketo or Pardot right away. You could do like a HubSpot or different things like that. But the core of your database, that's your source of truth, the Salesforce. Please invest in that early on. That would be the first thing that I would buy. And the other thing is, I said, negotiate your contracts. Everything is negotiable. Sign a 1-year contract and make sure you negotiate for something that fits into your budget.
Mo, you mentioned Salesforce before as a starting point as well. So that's really good to know that both of you are saying this is a good idea to really help you move forward.
Yeah. The another thing that I would like to add apart from Salesforce is, when you are building your tech stack, again, this is going back again to thinking long-term, not short-term, right? So think of a long-term and ensure that you have your tech stack in a way that it scales out when it has to, right? If you are onboarding customers, you've got new subscription from your, prospects, and they have like thousands or 10,000s of users, make sure that your stack scales out in a timely manner so that you don't have to struggle, because there are many instances where I get from other EdTechs about inquiries about, hey, we got this new contract and we have the new term starting tomorrow. We want to make sure that these things happen. We want to scale out, but there are limitations. Of course, there will be limitations, right? Because I'm talking about a cloud vendor who works on subscription model, right? There will be limits to make sure that you are not overspending based on your budget, based on the nature of your spend. So that's why there will be limitations. However, if you have that auto scaling or a scaling out mechanism of your tech stack, then you will not encounter these problems. And the beauty about that is, you don't have to have that active all the time. You can just keep it at rest, and when it needs, it will scale out. So make sure that you do that homework or work with the experts, who can help you with that scaling part.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And if we're talking about areas of assistance and where to get help, EduGrowth is obviously a prime point of contact for all early stage, late stage startups. This LaunchPad is just one of the things that we're doing to really help early stage startups work out what the next step is and where to go. So obviously fantastic to to work with everyone here, but EduGrowth is a really good first point of call. If you do have any questions, as a prime example, two of the experts that we've got chatting to you, helping us with this particular program.
Hey, look, there is a question in the chat from Anubha. I just wanted to answer him. You don't need your own LMS. You can use any open source LMS to host your courses.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Perfect.
And one other thing I just want to touch on, I know we're getting short on time, but with tech stack, invest in the teams that you're investing in. So for example, if you're going to hire SDR team, invest in getting them outreach or Groove or something like that works with Salesforce to help, automate, streamline their workflows. Don't hire a sales team or SDR and say, oh, just work off this spreadsheet, or like invest in them to actually help make them successful. The payoff is definitely going to be worth it, in the long run for the people that you bring on.
Cool.
Perfect.
And look, can I add just a last point? All the audience before we close off. So guys, as Luke mentioned, that we work very closely with EduGrowth, right? And we work very, majority of my EdTechs are startups. In our language, any company that is under 5 years in operation is a startup. And there are different ways we are working with startups, right from the idea to the build to the development. And as I mentioned in my call, to the business development and sales cycle as well. So we have a program, EdStart, the link is already shared. That program will help you from a cost perspective, from a training perspective, from connections and network perspective, and also from a technical stack perspective. So just reach out if you need any help, but that link that was shared will give you full details of that program. It's a great program, especially designed for EdTech startups.
Thanks for that, Mo. We've got time for a few questions. So I really want to open the floor to people who are here. Please throw your questions into the chat, so we can answer any of these questions that you have. I do just want to circle back and just kind of summarize some of the really important points that I think we've spoken about today, just to make sure that those listening really get as much from this as possible. So in terms of, if we go back to the very start, building a strong foundation, it was all about what we do and how do we make sure that we've got that strong foundation. So some of the main points we spoke about were subject matter, so knowing who you are and what you're about, a point of difference when you're entering the market. What are you trying to do? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? Understanding your customer was, again, really important to know where you're coming from. And then networking and connections. So again, reach out to EduGrowth at any stage in terms of networking and connections. We're here to help you out throughout this process. Then we moved on to models for scaling. Some fantastic responses around making sure that you have long-term and short-term goals, and making sure that you have the ability to be nimble, but obviously don't throw everything away for one customer. I think Robbie said, unless it's Nike or Google, I think they were the two, like and
Amazon.
And Amazon,
I knew you'd have to throw that in, Mo. So they were the two things, make sure that you're prepared. Legal, contractual, and financial. I think we can all agree that leaning on those experts is really important there. Reaching out to experts in the field, especially in terms of the legal aspect, making sure that you are connecting with someone who understands the market. And then we spoke about tech stack, and Salesforce was the big thing that came through. Just before we wrap up, again, are there any questions that people have? Doesn't look like there's any in the chat. So once again, I would just like to thank our two guests, Robbie and Mo. This has been a fantastic opportunity to hear from two experts within their field. Both Robbie and Mo are happy to pass on their details to those involved in the session. So please feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you, because I think this is a great opportunity if we're talking about networking. Again, EduGrowth is Australia's education, technology and innovation industry hub. Through connection and collaboration, we're trying to accelerate Australia's EdTech ecosystem globally. If you have any questions or concerns or information, or the moment you leave this, you wish you had asked something, please feel free to reach out to us and we can help you move forward with any questions that you may have. Robbie and Mo, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having us, Lou.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you everyone for joining us online. Before we go, I do have one more thing. I just wanted to highlight, if we can get that slide put up from Jonathan. Brilliant. So I just want to do a shout out to those watching. We have Melbourne EdTech Week coming up, and as part of that, we have the EdTech and in particular Innovation Alley, which is something that EduGrowth is running and making sure that it's going to be as big as possible. So I just wanted to provide some extra information for those that are interested. We'd ask you to join us for a dedicated space for startups to exhibit alongside some of the world's biggest EdTech brands. EdTech is the largest gathering of education EdTech related professionals in the Southern Hemisphere. And again, Innovation Alley is the place to be if you are a startup. So as an EduGrowth member, you have first chance to apply as an exhibitor within Innovation Alley. As an exhibitor, you get a dedicated pod. You'll have a chance to get some wording listed on the event app and online directory. Your logo is going to be featured. You get 2 exhibition passes, and more importantly, or not more importantly, but you also get a chance to demo, and we have a pitching competition as well. So if you are interested, please reach out. We will send out the links at the end of this session. But that's all. Thank you so much for joining us. We will have our next session coming up in a week or so. So stay